One of the worst kept secrets in the NFL is officially out. Doug Nussmeier is the offensive coordinator for the Saints. We'll talk about this move right here on the Straight Up Saints podcast.
You're listening to the Straight Up Saints podcast.
What is up, Who Dat Nation? Welcome inside another edition of the Straight Up Saints podcast. I'm your host, Chris Rosevoglu, and as always, the Straight Up Saints podcast is brought to you by Scott Ficknair. Injury lawyers have been injured in any kind of accident, car, truck, 18-wheeler, hurt offshore. Scott Ficknair handles it all. You give him a call at 504-500-1111 for a free consultation. They'll always fight for the win. The Saints are done with their offensive coordinator search. They're going with Doug Nussmeier, who was the favorite from the jump due to his familiarity with Kellen Moore and just their background the last several years, working together with the Dallas Cowboys, moving together with the Chargers, making the jump to Philly for the 2024 season. Obviously, they just had so much success in Philly with the Eagles winning the Super Bowl. Jalen Hurts looked phenomenal in both the NFC Championship game and the Super Bowl. So obviously, that's a great mark to have on your resume for these two coaches. For Doug Nussmeier, look, he's been a quarterbacks coach for the last, I believe, 6-7 years in the NFL. Like I mentioned, Dallas, LA, Philly. And I think bringing him to New Orleans, regardless of who your quarterback's going to be for next season, I think is an added bonus. And obviously, when it comes down to that collaboration aspect of him and Kellen Moore, you want to make sure that there's that cohesiveness to your staff. You want to make sure everyone's on the same page. And for Kellen to get his guy, bringing in obviously more from that Eagles staff is, in my opinion, ideal. We just saw how productive that group was for the Eagles. So the more the merrier when it comes to kind of poaching from Philly. But in this particular situation, Doug Nussmeier is Kellen Moore's guy. And now the question's going to shift over to what do they do at quarterback, whether it's going with Spencer Rattler, whether it's going with Derek Carr for another year, whether it's drafting a quarterback. And obviously the elephant in the room that fans obviously want to address, which is, do you end up drafting Nussmeier's kid next year in Garrett from LSU? So I'm sure that's going to be a talking point that people are going to mention. I think it's way too early to get into that. We have to kind of see how the Saints play out this quarterback situation and the depth chart for 2025. And if they don't draft a quarterback and they don't make any big name moves at the position, I'm sure the speculation is just going to come up because that's just the normal way that's going to go about, right? Like, I think that is an option that fans are going to want to talk about. But in the immediate future, look, you're bringing in another experienced coach with a really nice resume over the last couple of years to help out a quarterback room that we just don't know who's going to be on the roster. But regardless, you feel good about that addition. And now all the focus shifts over to defensive coordinator because in terms of the offensive staff, you got to trust that Kellen Moore and Doug Nussmeier can take that success that they had in Philly and bring it to New Orleans. Now, speaking of the defensive coordinator position and what that's going to entail, it seems like you probably just have to go with the favorite right now, who's been Brandon Staley, also from the jump like Doug Nussmeier. Doug Nussmeier, we all said, the minute they had an offensive coordinator opening with the new staff, he was pointed to as the favorite, and he got the job. Well, Brandon Staley, who has history with Kellen Moore, working that 1 year with the Chargers, he also has that connection. He's also been the favorite from the jump. And while there is a chance it goes to someone else, they've interviewed Christian Parker, they've interviewed Durante Jones from the Minnesota Vikings. I believe if we're just going to play the numbers game, probably leans towards Brandon Staley. And whether or not that's a good or bad thing, I've talked about it at nauseum, and I'll talk about it more if the Saints make this move. I'm kind of in the middle tier of it. I'm indifferent. I've seen Brandon Staley be a good defensive coordinator before for that one season with the Rams with a lot of talent. And I've seen his defense struggle when he was the head coach of the Chargers. So is he just one of those really good defensive coordinators who can't be a head coach? Or was he kind of elevated by the ridiculous talent and players like Aaron Donald, who are generational players? So that's kind of where I have my questions. But I do believe Brandon Staley is the favorite to be defensive coordinator. And I believe as of right now, he most likely will be the defensive coordinator. But in the meantime, the focus is on Doug Nussmeier, bringing him back to New Orleans, a little bit of a reunion there and a homecoming for him. And we'll see if he can get things going with Kellen Moore because Lord knows the Saints offense needs to get back on track. And this quarterback room, whether it's Derek, whether it's Spencer, whether it is a new name in New Orleans, they need to have the right coaches at the ready. And at least from a philosophy standpoint and just resume standpoint, I do believe they may have those guys in Doug Nussmeier and Kellen Moore. So let me know what you think about the hire. Do you believe this is the right move for the Saints? And who do you want at defense coordinator? Let us know in the comment section below, and we'll get back to you. As always, stay tuned for more content here from Boot Crew Media and the Straight Up Saints podcast, the destination for the Who Dat Nation.